On November 1, 1919, United States Marines photographed a dead man tied upright to a door, propped in front of a Haitian flag, and released the image to the press. They meant it as a warning. It became something else entirely. That photograph and the man in it turned into the single most powerful symbol of Haitian resistance in the entire 20th century. And the files the U.S. military kept that year, tracking the men and women who fought, organized, and wrote against the American occupation of Haiti, still exist in American archives today. This is a different kind of list than our last three Haitian videos. Those covered 1791 to 1820. The Revolution, the Constitution, the Kingdom. This one jumps forward almost a full century, to 1915 through 1934, when the United States military occupied Haiti for 19 straight years, and a new generation of Haitians had to decide, all over again, what resisting and occupying power actually looked like. 15 surnames, some who fought with weapons, some who fought with newspapers and petitions, and some who did both at different points in their lives. Before we start, if your surname shows up on this list, comment it below with your department. Subscribe too, because we break down a new set of Caribbean surnames and their real documented origins every week. One more thing first. If you want the full, detailed picture behind your own surname, the first pinned link below leads to our surname research tool. Type in your last name, and it generates a complete PDF report pulling together what the historical record shows. It's free, it takes a couple of minutes, and every report generated genuinely helps support this channel. Open it now and keep listening. Quick note on this era before we count down. The United States occupied Haiti starting July 28, 1915, officially to stabilize the country and protect American financial interests, and stayed for 19 years. Resistance took two very different forms. In the countryside, armed guerrilla fighters called the Cacos fought Marines directly in the mountains. In the cities, journalists, poets, and politicians organized a different kind of resistance, using petitions, newspapers, and international diplomacy. This list includes both kinds of fighters, and it's honest about the fact that some of these men crossed between resistance and government more than once during their lives. Let's count down 15 of them. Number 15. Rigaud Antoine Rigaud appears in the historical record as a member of the Union Patriotique, the political resistance organization that coordinated much of the country's civilian opposition to the occupation through the 1920s and into the 1930s. Rigaud is recorded specifically helping organize the group's Second National Congress in Cap Haitien in 1931, alongside other committed members who refused to stand down even as the occupation government tried to peel off its leadership one by one. Number 14. Cauvin Victor Cauvin worked alongside Rigaud inside the Union Patriotique through the same period. Part of the core group of organizers who kept the movement functioning even after the occupation government offered ministry positions to some of its more prominent leaders, hoping to fracture the opposition from the inside. Cauvin and Rigaud were specifically named as the ones who refused that offer and kept organizing anyway. Number 13, Guérin-Élie Guérin was one of the founding members of the Union Patriotique when it formed in 1920, standing alongside Georges Sylvain at the organization's earliest meetings. The Union modeled itself in some ways on civil rights organizing happening in the United States at the exact same time, working to end restrictions on Haitian sovereignty through documented, public, organized pressure rather than armed conflict. 3 names in, all from the same civilian resistance organization. The next few take us into the mountains, where the resistance looked completely different and considerably more dangerous. Number 12. Sully Pierre Sully is remembered specifically as a Haitian soldier who resisted the occupation and was tortured and killed by Marine forces, one of the names historians and Haitian communities specifically invoke. Alongside the Cacos fighters, when honoring those who died opposing the occupation by force rather than by petition. His inclusion on lists honoring the resistance alongside Peralte and Batreville, despite being far less documented individually, is itself a reminder that the two most famous names on this list represent thousands of far less recorded people who fought and died the same way. Number 11. Jolibois Joseph Jolibois Fils was a journalist and Union Patriotique member whose resistance outlasted almost everyone else's on this list, in terms of sheer persistence. Correspondence preserved in American diplomatic archives shows Jolibois still writing from exile in Mexico City in the late 1920s, corresponding directly with Union Patriotique leadership back in Haiti, and refusing to let international attention on the occupation fade. The fact that his letters survive specifically because American officials were intercepting and filing them tells you something important about this entire list. Much of what we know about Haiti's resistance survives because the people trying to suppress it kept such detailed records of exactly who they were watching. Number 10. Bobo Rosalvo. Bobo was a nationalist political figure and one of the earliest and most vocal opponents of American intervention in Haiti, positioning himself as a presidential candidate opposed to the arrangement the occupation eventually imposed. Bobo's early public opposition made him a marked man in American diplomatic correspondence from the very first months of the occupation, well before the Union Patriotique had even formed as an organized movement. 10 down, 5 to go. And this next stretch includes the intellectuals who shaped how Haiti understood its own culture for the rest of the century, and the politicians whose choices during the occupation still get debated today. If you haven't opened that pinned link yet, now's a good moment to check your own surname while we finish the list. Number 9. Roumain Jacques Roumain was a novelist and revolutionary intellectual who, in 1934, the same year the occupation finally ended, founded Haiti's first Communist Party. Roumain later wrote Masters of the Dew, one of the most significant novels in Haitian literary history, a story about rural Haitian life and collective struggle that's still taught and read today, decades after his death. His surname connects directly to a specific kind of resistance almost nobody else on this list represents. The fight to control not just Haiti's government, but the story Haiti told about itself, in its own literature, on its own terms. Number 8. Price-Mars. Jean Price-Mars was one of the most consequential intellectuals Haiti has ever produced, an ethnographer who, in 1928, published Ainsi parle l'oncle, So Spoke the Uncle, a groundbreaking study that argued Haitian Vodou, Creole language, and rural folk culture deserved serious respect rather than the shame colonial and elite Haitian society had long attached to them. Price-Mars helped launch what became known as Haiti's indigenous movement, directly inspired by resisting an occupation that treated Haitian culture as inferior to justify its own presence. If you carry this surname, it belongs to the man who helped convince an entire generation of Haitians that their own culture, the one the Marines dismissed, was worth studying and defending on its own terms. Number 7. Sanon Horace Paulius. Sanon was a historian, diplomat, and Union Patriotique leader who had already served Haiti as Minister of Foreign Affairs decades before the occupation began. In 1924, Sanon co-founded Haiti's Société d'Histoire et de Géographie, an organization of Haitian intellectuals dedicated to studying the country's own past, specifically as an act of national pride during a period when a foreign power occupied it. Sanon's story also carries the complexity that runs through several names on this list. Years into his resistance work, the occupation-era government offered him a ministry position, and he accepted it. a choice one contemporary newspaper openly questioned at the time, asking how a man who had once refused to sign away Haitian sovereignty could later accept a role inside the very government enforcing it. Number 6. Thoby Percival. Thoby traveled to Washington in 1921 as part of a Union patriotic delegation that presented the U.S. Congress with a formal memoir documenting abuses committed by occupation troops, directly requesting a congressional investigation. That trip helped trigger a real U.S. Senate inquiry into the occupation's conduct. Like Sanon, Thoby's path didn't stay purely oppositional. He later served inside the Haitian government himself during the final years of the occupation, a shift that drew criticism from Union patriotic members, who felt he had crossed the same line their movement had been formed to resist in the first place. 4 names left, and the closer this gets, the harder it becomes to draw a clean line between resistance and government. Because the man who founded the movement, the men who eventually ran the country, and the fighter who became a national martyr all end up connected to each other. Number 5. Vincent Steignot. Vincent stood alongside Georges Sylvain and Jean Price Mars at the earliest meetings of the Union Patriotique in 1920, part of the movement's founding political leadership. By 1930, Vincent had become president of Haiti himself, presiding over the occupation's final years and negotiating its formal end in 1934. Vincent later extended his own presidency well beyond its original term and grew increasingly authoritarian, a path that turned a founding resistance figure into a leader some of his former Union patriotique colleagues came to view as a disappointment. It's one of the more complicated arcs on this entire list, a name that starts in genuine anti-occupation organizing and ends up somewhere considerably murkier. Number 4. Dartiganave Philippe Soudray. Dartiganave became Haiti's first president under the American occupation in 1915, chosen with direct U.S. backing shortly after the Marines arrived. The Union Patriotique specifically named Dartiganave, alongside his successor Louis Borno, as men who had made themselves willing instruments of American control over Haiti's own government. This entry belongs on the list precisely because it complicates the story rather than simplifying it. Not every Haitian in a position of power during these 19 years chose resistance, and being honest about that is part of understanding what the occupation actually cost the country, politically as well as physically. Number 3. Sylvain Georges Sylvain founded the Union Patriotique in 1920, becoming the organizing force behind nearly every other political resistance name on this list. A poet and lawyer by training, Sylvain modeled the organization's approach directly on international civil rights and anti-colonial movements happening at the same time, working to build international pressure against the occupation through legal argument and public documentation rather than direct confrontation. Sylvain died in 1925. In the middle of the occupation he'd spent 5 years organizing against, never living to see it end 9 years later. Number 2, Batreville Benoit Batreville, nicknamed T. Benoit, was a school teacher before he became a resistance fighter, and a documented descendant of a comrade in arms of Jean-Jacques Dessalines himself, connecting this entire occupation-era list directly back to the revolutionary generation from our earlier videos. After Charlemagne Peralte's death, Batreville took command of the Cacos and led an attack directly into Port-au-Prince in January of 1920, a battle so intense that Haitians came to call it simply the debacle. Contemporary accounts describe Batreville's tactics growing considerably more ruthless after he took command, including the killing of an American lieutenant colonel during an ambush months later. Batreville himself was killed by Marine forces in 1920, less than a year after Peralte. Number 1. Peralte Charlemagne Masséna. Peralte was a Haitian army officer who escaped Marine custody in September of 1918 and built a Cacos force that grew to roughly 5,000 fighters within a year, all committed to what he publicly called driving the invaders into the sea. On October 6, 1919, Peralte led a raid directly into Port-au-Prince. It failed within minutes, and he escaped, but it convinced the Marine Corps he had become too dangerous to leave alive. Weeks later, on November 1st, a Marine sergeant and a Haitian collaborator disguised themselves and infiltrated Peralte's camp at night. Peralte was shot and killed. What happened next is the reason his name outranks everyone else on this list. Marines photographed his body, tied upright against a door in front of a Haitian flag, and distributed the image, intending it as a warning to anyone still considering resistance. Instead, the photograph became one of the most enduring symbols of Haitian national resistance in the country's entire history. An image still reproduced in Haitian art, murals, and political memory a century later. In 1994, decades after his death, Charlemagne Peralte's face was placed on Haiti's currency. The Marines meant to make an example of him. Haiti made him permanent instead. 15 names. Civilian organizers who kept a movement alive through arrests and bribery attempts. A journalist who kept writing from exile years after everyone expected him to go quiet. The intellectual who convinced a nation its own culture was worth defending on its own terms. Men who started in resistance and ended up running the very government they once opposed. And the fighter the Marines tried to turn into a warning, who became a permanent symbol instead. None of this was simple, and this list doesn't pretend it was. Some of these names resisted with weapons, some with words, and some of them resisted for years before eventually joining the system they'd once fought against. That complexity is the actual history, not a flaw in telling it. If you saw your name anywhere on this list, drop it in the comments with your department. And if you haven't yet, open that first pinned link and get your own full surname report. Subscribe too, because next week we go even deeper into the records this era left behind.